News and bad news about their morning. Said they got up and they took their medicine. That was the good news. The bad news was they took the wrong medicine, but the good news was they were free of worms and fleas for the next 6 months because of that medication. The Bible says in Proverbs 17 that a cheerful heart is good medicine. Boy, we sure need a cheerful heart. It's a tough, sometimes a tough experience that life can be. And we may lose a bunch of things in our life, but we need to make sure we don't lose our sense of humor. Our sense of humor can really help us survive some really difficult and burdensome and stressful times. We are thrilled that you are here. We are just thrilled. We have done Widowhood workshops for as few as 6 people and as many as over 400, and it really doesn't matter how many people are present. What matters is the degree of interest. And anytime that you have a good degree of interest in talking about some of these tough things, there can be great value that comes from it. And I want to promise you one thing. We will finish on time at the end of the day. We may go a lot of different routes and take a few detours along the way between now and then, but if you've got something else planned, we sure want to make sure that you're released from this at the time that's scheduled. So we'll honor the value of your time in your life. We want to begin with singing a song that I think is very appropriate in light of what we're talking about. Now, before we sing that song, I do have some really, really, really good news. I did not come here today to preach at you. You can clap now. Okay. Now tomorrow, if you come back, I will preach at you, okay, during the worship time. But during the Bible class time, it'll be just like it is right now. We're going to be having open discussions. I call it thinking out loud together, and I'm going to encourage you to think out loud together with me. I guarantee you that you know some things I do not know. I might know a couple of things that you don't know. You have had experiences I have not had. And maybe I've had a couple of experiences that you haven't had. We can all learn together. What we're going to do, we're not going to have you sit here and listen simply to a lecture. We just want to talk and we want to think out loud together. And I think that's a lot better for our attention span and the struggles that we have with that nowadays. And I think it'll help a lot with your retention as well. We're going to begin by singing a song. Now, the guy who's going to lead our singing came all the way from Carthage, Missouri to be here. And he calls himself the gopher, but actually he's the assistant. And he loves to sing, and he's a great song leader. And we're going to sing a song together that's perfect for here. Cheryl Wayne Lawhon, Lawhon. Cheryl, you know the boy named Sue. This is the man named Cheryl. He says his mama wanted a girl, and he wasn't one. So anyway, Cheryl Wayne Lawhon, a great brother in the Lord, and I want you to enjoy us singing together, and he does a great job with our song leading. So let's begin with that, and then we'll pray.
Very well-known song, but it goes with Dean's lesson so very well. When upon my
billows you are tempest-tossed, when you are discouraged, thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. Are you ever burdened with a load of care? Does the cross seem heavy you are called to bear? Count your many blessings, every doubt will fly, and you will be singing as the days go by. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. So amid the conflict whether great or small. Do not be discouraged, God is over all. Count your many blessings, attend. Help and comfort give you to your journey's end. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. Let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you for a beautiful morning this morning. Thank you for the fact that we can see the sunshine. Thank you, Father, for the people that we interact with in our lives. Thank you for the relationships that come as a result of those people. And thank you for the experiences that we have with people. And Father, we're so thankful that you have blessed us in our lives with this opportunity to spend some time together, thinking out loud together about some really tough things. Help us, Father, to be willing to be vulnerable and open and honest about the struggles that we have in our life. Help us to appreciate the fact that we all have our issues, that we all struggle with different things, and maybe some people have more things to struggle with than others, but help us, Father, to appreciate with humility what a challenge that life can be, and help us to keep in mind what a value that we can be to one another in helping each other with the challenges that we have in this life. Father, we're so thankful for this morning. Bless us all with some clear-minded thinking this morning, and help us to learn some things that will help us, and then help us to help others. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. We have a couple of people with the Widowhood Workshop Ministry that help me. Cheryl Wayne is one. Miss Amy is another, Amy Moore. I'd like for both of them to come up here and distribute some things while we're getting started. There are some notepads we want everybody to get, and also some tracts that we want everybody to get. All these are given to you free. We want to do all we can to give you resources to be of help to you. I told you a little bit about Cheryl Wayne. He's from Carthage, Missouri. Miss Amy is from the Dallas, Texas area, Addison, if you know something about the Dallas, Texas area. And she is my more than a friend, more than a blessing, Amy. And both of these people know something about loss, like many of you know something about loss. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning. We're going to talk about life, love, and loss. Now, you're on your own in regard to something to write with. If you guys do not happen to have a pen or a pencil, do not get your hand in any woman's purse. That is not a safe place for a guy to stick his hand. There are traps in there, guys. And unless you want to go to the hospital across the street from where I spent the night last night and get some stitches, don't stick your hand in a woman's purse. But maybe you might ask them, ma'am, do you have something I could borrow that I could write with? But we want to make sure everybody gets a notepad, and make sure everybody gets one of those great tracts about grief and about how we can help other people with grief and how we can help ourselves too. Life, love, and loss. Look at this adorable baby up there in that picture. Isn't that a beautiful baby? I want us to think out loud together for a little bit about what kind of a world that babies are born into. For a few moments here, I want you to think, and I want you to give me a word or a phrase that you would use to describe the world. Go ahead. Scared. It's a scary place, isn't it? It can be a very scary place. Yes. What else? Dangerous. Yes, it can be a very dangerous world, and that's what causes us sometimes to be fearful. What other word would you use? Chaos. It's a chaotic world, isn't it? Well, don't you just hate, just this morning in the hotel room, I happened to see a little bit of video about what's going on over in Ukraine. And I have a very dear friend who just came back from Poland who's worked in the Ukraine for years. And he is helping to supply benevolent needs in the Ukraine, and just a couple of days ago came back from being 3 weeks in Poland to make sure that there's good distribution of the things that we've gotten together for those people. Boy, what an awful, chaotic place to be right now, and a dangerous place, a very scary place. How about another word or phrase you'd use to describe the world? Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, definitely wonderful. How about another word or phrase? Beautiful. Opportunity. It's a world of opportunity, isn't it? You know, when you look at what you mentioned, one of the really neat things about the things that you mentioned is there were both positive and negative things. Is your life all bad? Is your life all good? Wouldn't it be neat if it was all good? Yeah, but it's not always all good. One of the things that we have to keep in mind, we do live in a fallen world. We're not, like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz said to Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore. Well, we're not in paradise anymore. We live in a fallen world, and there's temptation, and there's sin, and there's collateral damage as a result of that, and there can be some craziness. So our world is not always going to be positive. But I want you to think about the positives and the negatives here for a little bit. And I want you to look at this image. And I want you to tell me, when you see that image, what does it tell you? What does it communicate to you? When we see things, this morning when I was walking, I saw that big honking sun come up. And it was just a wow moment. I took a couple of different pictures when it was in different positions as it was barely coming up. And boy, when you see an image, it has an effect on you. You read, internally you read images you see. So you look at this image that I've got in front of you now, and what does it tell you? That your blessings what? Your blessings are greater than your burdens. Now, why did you assume that from that picture? Anybody? Why would you assume that from the picture? Yeah, the weight. You've got the blessings down below, and then you've got the burdens up higher. So the blessings outweigh the burdens. Now, do you always feel that way? Is that a fact? Do the blessings always outweigh the burdens? And do you always feel that way? Man, I'll tell you what, the more I thought about this, the more intrigued I got. I don't know why it is that I kind of wish I could have a mulligan and go back to being like 25 again. I'd be so much better in my young adulthood and my middle age if I could do that. I'm not sure I want all the experiences I've had since then, but there are things that you learn by life experience, and there are things that you learn from books and blogs, and there are things you learn from people. This image in your life, are they the same or are they different? This picture and your life. The guy that is typically associated with a lot of suffering in the Old Testament, do you remember his name? Job, yeah. As a matter of fact, when people think of Job, they think of the problem of human suffering. You know how bad stuff can go, how your world can crash and burn and things can be such a mess. And there is a lot of discussion about suffering in the book of Job. Now, all that being said, I want you to think out loud together with me here just a little bit about not his suffering, but I want you to think about his blessings. Now, from what you know from having some familiarity with that story in the book of Job, just before the Psalms in our English Bible, what were some of his blessings? Family, okay. Anybody tell me any details about his family? How many? He had a boatload of children, double-digit number, by the way, 10. 7 sons and 3 daughters. Think about the grocery bill. 7 sons and 3, that's bigger than that family that lived on Walton's Mountain. Back on the series, you know about the Walton family. 10 children. Now, in addition to 10 children, what did he also have that made those 10 children legitimate? Okay, he had a wife, right? He had a wife. You know what some of us would give to have a mate again? He had a wife and he had 10 children. How valuable is that blessing of family? To have a marital mate and to have children. How big of a blessing is that? It's a pretty big one, isn't it? Okay. Now, what else did he have in regard to his blessings? He was prosperous. As a matter of fact, let me read you this list. 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a very large household. As a matter of fact, it says in Job chapter 1 at the end of verse 3, so that made this man the greatest of all the people of the East. Whew! Boy, was he ever blessed. He had critters galore. He had a wife. He had children. It was a prosperous life that he was living. Now, what did he lose? He specifically mentioned things that he lost. He lost his children. How many of his children? All 10 of his children. Anybody here go through the loss of a child? Yeah. That is so unnatural, abnormal. That is such an awful, I hope I never experience that. I hate it when I hear about people experiencing that. It's just not right. You bury your grandparents. You bury your parents. You might, on some occasion, think about the possibility of burying a spouse, but you don't bury children. It's just such a unique and horrific kind of a loss, but yet it happens. I remember in Hartville, Ohio, at the cemetery, a little baby. What can you say? You know, what can you do? It just, to lose a child is awful. Now, think about losing all your children. Think about losing all 10 of your children. So he's lost all of his children. Now, specifically, what else did he lose? He lost all of his livestock. So he's wiped out there. Okay. What else did Job lose in the story of the book of Job? He lost his health. Okay. He had these boils from the crown of his head to the sole of his feet. It was awful. He was sitting there with a broken piece of pottery, a potsherd, and he was scraping himself in agony. You know, just awful. Can you think of anything else he lost? You mentioned about the friendships. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. What about his wife? Is there any way that he lost his wife? In what way? Why would you say that? She said, curse God and die. You know, she snapped, didn't she? And sometimes we do that. That's what human beings sometimes do. When hard times come and the weight gets so heavy, we snap. I mean, great, godly people, mature adults who've had a lot of life experience can snap. You know why that happens? Because we're human. We need to accept the fact that we are human. And there are going to be times in our life where things might get so bad and we get so stressed and so upset that we snap. Now, when we snap, what kinds of things do we say and do? Do we do and say typical things that are normal for us? We say extreme things, don't we? There are things sometimes that come out of our mouth and things that we do sometimes when we're under heavy stress that are very uncharacteristic for us. But we do that because we're human. You know, you can go to a machine and you can plug in certain information or turn certain knobs, and you can mechanically see things happen, predictable things happen. We're not machines. Oftentimes, you know, we go to our computer and we hit certain keys and things happen, and it's just consistent till your server crashes and burns. But see, all that's predictable. Machinery is typically predictable. Human beings are not predictable. Now, why do you think that she went? Do you think Mrs. Job was a heathen? I mean, when you hear about Job, he's blameless, he's upright, he's one that fears God, he shuns evil, he sacrifices for the welfare of his family because he's concerned about his kids and the spiritual state of his kids. What kind of a woman do you think she was? Well, she became bitter, but do you think she was an awful person? If Job was the kind of guy he was, do you think he would have proposed to a woman who was, you know, heathen or barbaric in character? You know, I just suspicion she had to be a good woman too. I can't imagine a man described like he's described being so stupid as to make a decision to be married to somebody who was an awful marital mate, who was, you know, had a character whose character was totally in contrast to his belief system and his most valuable things in his heart. But she said, curse God and die. Now, let's cut that woman some slack. Now, I realize, you know, what she said was way out of line. There's never a rationale to justify curse God and die. But the woman, how much of the livestock did she lose? How many of the children did she lose? How many of those children, by the way, were conceived within her and she carried and then went through labor and travail to deliver? That woman, you know, when you stop to think about it, you know, we talk about the suffering of Job. What about the suffering of Mrs. Job? So there comes a point where she does snap. So he loses the support of his wife. She wasn't a 5-star wife, okay? If there is one. But here you've got these people that are really struggling. Now, I'm going to read to you in Job chapter 14 something that Job said. And when I read this to you, I want you to think about what you see in that image up there. This is Job chapter 14 and verse 1. I'll bet some of you have heard this verse before. Man who is born of woman. By the way, do you know of any other way to get born than born of woman? Now, in our culture, I don't know. We may be trying to figure a way out, but that's another time for another workshop. Man who is born of woman, so he's got that right, is a few days. Now, is that right? A few days? What if you were to live to 100? Would that be a few days? Compared to what? Eternity. Compared to eternity. I love the expression that Isaiah uses to describe the Lord. He inhabits eternity. I wonder what that's like. He inhabits eternity. Human beings look at life snapshot. God sees video. And that video has been running forever. It's been running forever. It's in eternity. God sees the video, we see snapshots. What's 100 years in comparison or contrast to eternity? It's like the proverbial drop in a bucket, isn't it? You know, he's right. Man that is born of woman is a few days. Now, watch this last phrase. And full of trouble. He said, man that is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. Now, look at that picture up there. What about what he said? Man that is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. What about that last phrase? Are man's days full of trouble? is full of trouble consistent with what you see on that image. It's a seesaw. What's on the other end of the burdens? Blessings. What did he have at the worst time in his life? What did he have in the way of blessings? We often do not think this way. He had what? He had God. If you have God, how many burdens would it take to get that teeter-totter to where the burdens would be down? If you had God. Depends on where your focus is. Now, he had a God in heaven who loved him, who cared about him, who was watching over him. As a matter of fact, God was protecting him. When Satan questioned his character, God said, look, I'm not going to mess with him. If you want to mess with him, you go ahead. But God drew the lines and told Satan, you got to color inside the lines that I draw. So Satan attacks him. But God said, don't you dare touch him. And then Satan still wasn't convinced. And Satan said, well, God, what you need to do is you need to touch him. You need to mess with him. If you mess with him, he'll turn his back on you. God said, I ain't going to touch him. If you want to touch him, you go ahead. But don't you dare take his life. See, God was in control. God knew what Job could handle. There was no question in God's heart about what was in Job's heart. God wasn't doing this to Job. Job thought God was doing it to him. And he still did not turn his back on God. But Satan was doing that to him, attacking him. God was permitting it, but God wasn't doing it. But God knew what was going on in Job's life, was in control of what Job was experiencing, knew what was going on in Job's heart and in Job's mind. God knew what Job needed. He had God. If you have God in your life, what else do you need? There's a book called A Sense of Presence, and in that book, Edwin White, in this book called A Sense of Presence, he made this observation. When we reduce life to its essentials, only one thing is needful: to have God. I think he's right. If we have God, then we have the one thing that we need, because that one thing that we need knows everything and knows us better than anybody, knows our circumstances better than anybody, knows what we need more than anybody, and loves us more than anybody. Job had God in his life. A huge blessing. Now, in addition to having God in his life, what else did he have? Even in the worst time of his suffering, what else did he have besides God? He had more than God. He had 3 friends. Now, my suspicion is he had more than 3, but we read about him having 3 friends who dropped everything going on in their life, shut their life down, traveled to where he was, and sat there in sackcloth and ashes for 7 days, didn't speak a word, and ministered to him by his presence. You know what to do? You know what the best thing to do is when there is somebody hurting that you know they're hurting? Go to them. You don't have to say a word. As a matter of fact, it's probably better you don't. Because sometimes people say things that are trite, and sometimes they say things, even with good intention, that is hurtful. You can Google stupid things said to widowed people. Literally, you can do that. You can Google dumb things that are said to people who suffer loss. There's a long list of things, dumb things that people say, with all good intention. And probably all of us have said some of those things before we learn better. But they came and sat for 7 days. Now, if those 3 friends are female, I'm not so sure they could last 7 days. But I don't know. They were 3 males, and they did last 7 days and didn't speak a word. But when they opened their mouth, oh no, it kind of got bad, didn't it? And they even started accusing him wrongly of things. And they morphed into what he later called miserable comforters. But they didn't come to be miserable comforters. That was not their intention. They came with the best of intention. In Job chapter 2, in verse 11, it says, "For they made an appointment together to come and to mourn him and to comfort him." Sometimes we, with best of intentions, we do good things, and sometimes with the best of intentions, we do things that are not so good. That's being human. There are people in our suffering and heartache that are going to be a blessing, and some people that are not going to be a blessing. They're going to make the struggle harder. Not knowingly, not at fault, not intentionally, but they could make it more difficult. So he has friends. So he has God, he has friends. What else does he have? He still has a wife. And again, I ask you, do you know what some of us would give to have that life partner? She may not have been the 5-star woman, to be a wife, but he still had a wife. When you have somebody to share your burdens with, the closest kind of human relationship possible, that's a tremendous blessing. Even when you don't always see eye to eye about the circumstances, it's just a great blessing to have somebody else like that close in your life. And boy, it's so hard to live life without that person. I say, by the way, Job's condition in the worst time of his suffering, was he dead or alive? He was alive. He was alive. So he still had a beating heart. Blood was still coursing through his veins. He still had life. You know what you have when you have life and you have God? You have hope. But I'm going to read to you something. I don't know how many times I've read the book of Job, and I didn't see this until just recently. Job chapter 7 and verse 6. Job said, "My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle." Now, I've never been where there's a weaver's shuttle. I need to Google that and find one and go watch one. I figure this must be quick. He said, "My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle." Now he says something else, the second half of that verse. "My days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle and are spent without hope." Did he have hope? No or sure? Let me ask you, did he have God? If you are alive and you have God, do you have hope? God is the God of hope. But yet he said he had no hope. Why would a man of God say something so extreme? My life is just full of trouble. Well, it wasn't full of trouble. He had a lot of blessings. He had a lot of value in the lot of blessings he had, but yet he went to the extreme of saying, my life is full of trouble. See, when we get upset, when we get emotional, we say and do extreme things that are not characteristic and sometimes not always consistent with reality, because we're struggling. When we're struggling, we say and do stuff that's not always consistent with reality and not consistent even with our character or our track record. And then he goes so far as to say in Job 7 verse 6, he had no hope. Yet he had God, and God was providing for him everything that he needed. God was watching over him and making sure he wasn't experiencing something he could not handle. And yet he said he had no hope. You know, if I was in the presence of somebody who was really struggling with their life circumstance, and they said something that just wasn't true, or maybe even cursed God, maybe even said something like Mrs. Job did, I'm just going to curse God and die. Do you know what I would say in response to that person? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. For the same reason, I will not teach a drunk about Jesus. until I get the drunk sobered up. He's in no condition to hear about Jesus when he's drunk. I need to sober him up first and then teach him about Jesus. You know, when a person is in deep grief and they say things that are just very abnormal and uncharacteristic for them, even things that need to be corrected, you need to pick your time to do that. And often in the throes of great emotion is not the time to address that kind of stuff. Create a time or make sure that you observe and catch a time to talk to them about some of these things that they've said in the past. Here's the reality. We're always more blessed than we're burdened. We may not feel it. We're always more blessed than we're burdened. There's never a time when your burdens outweigh your blessings. Never, never. It was never the case in Job's life. It's never the case in your life or in my life. But sometimes we can feel like our life is nothing but full of trouble and we have no hope. But that's extreme thinking produced by a human in the midst of really difficult, troublesome times. What happens in life is we become attached to things that sometimes we don't intend to get attached to, and then there are things that we get attached to that are intended. We intentionally choose to become attached to them. Now, for an opportunity to choose a gift out of the precious box of prizes, my family has a golden chest of prizes, but I couldn't, because I flew to Dallas and drove up here from Dallas, I couldn't bring the golden chest of prizes. They wouldn't pass it in the TSA. But if you know the answer to my question, you can pick from the golden chest of prizes. Now, let me ask you this question. Do you know where this movie was filmed that this picture came from? Do you know where it was filmed? Can you even identify the state? You don't have to identify the city. Massachusetts. Good guess, but wrong. But really close. I'll give you a hint. It starts with a vowel. New York, that's a consonant. Oh, ding, 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 ding. Where was that? Raise your hand. Oh, back here. Okay, Cheryl Wayne, take this back there. Now, let me show you. There's all kinds of good stuff in this box. There is a beach ball. There is a whoopee cushion. If you're married, there's some earplugs. Okay. There's a word find book in here. There's some Armor All for your car. There's some bubbles if you like to blow bubbles. To me, the most important thing in here is there's a sign. Beware of the dog. But what I did was I put a white piece of paper over the word dog, and you can put in there whatever you want to. Like if you want to put beware of the husband, and then put this on your front door, or I know one person here that could put preacher, and she could put this on the front door, beware of the preacher. So anyway, there's all kinds of really great stuff in there. You can look through there and pick one and only one thing. Raise your hand again so Cheryl Wayne knows where he's going. Yeah, this was Cleveland, Ohio. This house where the movie was done is actually a museum. It was about an hour north of where I lived for a bunch of years, for several decades. But anybody know the name of the movie? Christmas Story. Okay, Cheryl Wayne, bring one up here, and she can have one up here. Yeah, it's Christmas Story. Now, does anybody know, don't you dare touch your phone and Google this. Does anybody know the name of the boy whose tongue is stuck to the pole? What? Going once, going... What's the other boy's name? I'm not giving you a prize for this. What's the other boy's name? Ralphie, that's the easy one. See, I was asking you about the hard one. Anybody know? Okay, bring the box back here. Y'all aren't good enough, okay? You need to do your homework before you come to a Widowhood workshop. His name is Flick. Flick, yeah, Flick. Now, do you think he planned on getting his tongue stuck to that pole? No. Yeah. sometimes what happens is we become attached to things we don't intend to become attached to. Like, for instance, has anybody here bought or gone to the dog pound and got a canine or a feline? Okay, you get a cat or a dog, and what do they morph into? You buy them or get them as pets, and what do they become? Babies. Yeah, they become our baby and become a member of our family, don't they? See, you become, over time, you become unintentionally attached to something. Okay, now, when I was 15 years old and finally started going to church, I grew up a heathen, and when I started going to church, there was a girl, her name was Ruth Ann. She was 15, I was 15, and I became attached to her intentionally. And we became really good friends, and we dated through high school and got married when we were 19 years old. By the way, if this is live streamed or ever seen in the future, please, I do not recommend anybody get married at 19 years old. But we got married at 19 years old and enjoyed 41 years together. But I became intentionally attached to her. She became intentionally attached to me. So what happens is we become attached to things in this life, and when we become attached to things in this life, what is inevitable is you're going to experience losses. You're going to lose things that are valuable to you, that are important to you. Now, other than people, name me some things that if we lost them, it would shake us up. Pets. They're pet cemeteries. Okay? How about something besides a pet? A home. Now, why is a home loss a big deal? Now, I can go on Zillow and find out what the value of your home, it's an inflated price, but I can find the value of your home. And there's insurance money that you can get to replace your home. What's the big deal about losing your home? Memories. Why are the memories a big deal? People. Relationships, experiences. I often have people talk about how they hated losing their photographs. They can't get them back. You know, they're not on a phone, they're not on an iPad, they're not in a computer, and they'll never ever see those pictures again. That's awful. Yeah. Now, Matthew chapter 6 says, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Your heart follows your treasures. We place a value on things based on how we feel about them. Inside of us, we have a value meter, and we assess the value of people and things and experiences. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So when we become attached, when our heart becomes attached to things and we place a good value on them, and then we lose them, then what we do is we grieve. That's what we do. What about, has anybody here ever been diagnosed with cancer? Okay. What about when you lose your health? You get a diagnosis about a neurological disease, maybe ALS or Parkinson's, or you get a cancer diagnosis. What about if you, think of something else that you would lose? Yeah, a job. Your job can become your identity over time. And when you lose a job that you've done for a bunch of years, how does it make you feel? You know, somebody comes in, and like a friend of mine up in Akron, Ohio, he came in 39 years. He worked for them. 39 years he worked for the Firestone Tire and Rubber Company. And they come in one day, say, we're going to move your job to Nashville. And he said, well, I don't want to go to Nashville. And they said, well, we don't want you to go to Nashville either. And that's how he was unceremoniously released and retired by Firestone. How do you think that made him feel? Terrible. Yeah, it was awful. Can you think of something else that you could lose that would really shake you up?
Your wedding band.
Yeah, your wedding band. Why is it that women get so cranked up so concerned about losing their wedding band. I mean, you can replace it, right? I mean, you can go on eBay and find one, can't you? Let me tell you about last night at Cheddar's. There was a server, a young lady who had just graduated from Crowley's Ridge College. I need to learn how to pronounce that. I've known of that place for years. Anyway, she had this ring on. And I asked her, because it really caught my attention, I said, her name was Brene, and I said, Brene, show me your ring. And she showed me the ring that she had, and she said, I got it at Walmart. What? It was really a pretty ring. I said, I've seen women wear, would a guy have the guts to do that? Buy the ring for the woman he's proposing?
You better not.
You better not, Cheryl said. You better not. How much, Amy, do you remember what she said she paid for it? $4.
For a set of 4.
For a set of 4. $4 for a set of 4. Oh. I highly recommend go to Cheddar's in Jonesboro, ask for Brene, and ask to look at her ring. You know, you lose a ring and it has monetary value, but what does it have besides monetary value? It has sentimental value. That's right. See, that's a treasured item that you have. Your heart follows your treasures. Now, you know, think about a woman, think about a young lady who goes to a state university. And what if she's raped? And she loses her virginity? Do you think she's going to grieve because of the loss of that virginity in a violent experience? You know, you think about the wonderful, godly young lady who loves the Lord dearly and has for years. But in a moment of passion, she gives away her virginity. Do you think she's going to grieve because of the sin that she chose to participate in a moment of passion? Yeah. There's all kinds of losses that we experience in this life. Now, one of the problems with experiencing loss in this world is we live in a grief-illiterate society. We don't know about grief, and because we don't know about grief, and we won't talk about grief because it's a negative topic. These workshops that we do are often initially viewed as unpleasant and painful experiences. And that's why a lot of people won't come. They just won't come because they view it as uncomfortable for them. And so what do human beings do in the midst of what's uncomfortable? You back away from it. Well, that creates this grief-illiterate culture. So we struggle with grieving because we don't know about it. We've not been taught about it. Even churches sometimes don't talk about this kind of stuff. And because of that, then, we're really messed up because we've suffered the loss of something really precious to us. And there are so many different kinds of losses that can really do a number on us. We need to recognize the reality of the grief that we experience when we lose things that are really, really, really important to us. That will help us, if we learn about the grief, it will help us to grieve effectively and help us help other people, because all of us know other people who are experiencing losses too. It can help us to know better how to help other people. There are studies that have been done about life stressors. All the studies I've ever looked at in regard to life stressors always come up with the same results in regard to the number 1 and number 2 life stressor. The number 2 life stressor is divorce. Another loss. People don't say I do with the intention of saying I won't anymore. You say I do with the best of hope and with a lot of dreams. And when things crash and burn, you've not only lost the marriage, but you've lost all the hopes and all the dreams that you had when you said, I do. There are all kinds of losses. And when we experience those losses, we struggle with those and struggle mightily. We need to learn how to handle those and handle those effectively and help other people do the same. Now, let me share with you a concept. here in the last couple of minutes of this session, 5 minutes of this session, let me share with you a concept that might help you to be patient with yourself and patient with others. A loss is change. It's a forced change. Sometimes you intentionally change. You relocate yourself. That's a chosen change. You seek another job, maybe you change your major in college. There are a lot of things, you choose to get married. There are a lot of changes in life that we choose. Then there are changes that are forced on you. You just have to deal with them. Here's cancer. Life says, here's cancer, deal with it. Or life says, here's an accident where you're maimed for the rest of your life. Deal with it. Life gifts us not just blessings, but life sometimes gifts us stuff we don't want, like burdens. And so you have to learn to deal with it. So there are forced changes and chosen changes. There are also cyclical changes, like aging. That's a change. We don't like it, but we've got to be adjusting to it because it's just going to come. It's a cyclical change. Now, what you want with change is you want a new beginning. What you'd like to do is go to the wall, flip the switch, and then bingo, you're there. But just like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, no, there's a yellow brick road. And you got to follow the yellow brick road to where you want to go. She wanted to get to the wizard because she knew the wizard could give her the solution to her issues and her 3 friends as well. You want a new beginning. Well, what you've got to realize is, number one, you don't flip a switch to get there. There's no plane ticket to there, no Amtrak ticket to there. You can't even get in your car and go there. You've got to walk a journey. And this journey is through a forest. And the way I depict this forest is with this picture. Now, what's really weird about this forest has some really weird characteristics. Number one, there are people in it, but there are no footprints and there are no pathways. You've got to find your way to the new beginning, and there are people in the forest, but no evidence of a path to get to a different place. You've got to find your own pathway. You've got to get to your new beginning. And in the midst of doing that, you're going to meet some people who are going to be very helpful to you. You're going to meet some people who are going to be hurtful. Hopefully not intentionally. They're going to say and do things, or you're going to be neglected, and that's going to be hurtful. And that's just the way it is. You've got to work yourself through that forest. And there are going to be times that you're going to just sit down and cry. And there are going to be times you're going to be mad. And there are times that you may want to beat on a few trees or kick some limbs around or some leaves because you're frustrated, because you want to get to the new beginning and you can't find it. It's kind of like being in a maze. And, when you get in a maze, you just keep trying a bunch of different things and you hope eventually that you can get out of the maze. And that's what it's like after you've suffered great loss. It's hard work. And it's mentally and emotionally sometimes exhausting. But what you want to do is keep working on it. There is a guy, his name's William Bridges. He wrote a book called Transitions. It's a great book. William Bridges. The book is called Transitions. The subtitle is Senior Moment. I just forgot. It deals with the transitions of life. He calls this the neutral zone. This picture, this image on the screen that you're seeing right now is my summary of that entire book. I've saved you a lot of reading. This is the summary, the neutral zone. What you've got to realize is you can't get to a new beginning until you go through this neutral zone. Now, how long are you going to be in the forest, this neutral zone? I have no idea. How many people are you going to meet? I have no idea. What's it going to be like for you? I don't know. And don't ever say to somebody who's suffered loss, I know how you feel. That is probably the most offensive thing that you can say to somebody who's gone through a divorce. or somebody who has lost a child, or somebody who has been diagnosed with cancer, or somebody who has lost their spouse. Do not ever say to somebody, I know how you feel, because you do not. You may think you do, but you do not. Now, you may be able to, in some ways, relate to them better, and you may be able to be empathetic to them, but you do not know how they feel. You don't live in their skin. Only they live in their skin. Only they have had those experiences. You have not. I would highly recommend never say, I know how you feel. But you can love them. You can be with them. You can be a listening ear. You know, the Bible talks about the laying on of hands. There's a laying on of ear. That's when you go to somebody and you just listen. Or you call them on the phone and you just listen. Or you FaceTime with them and you just listen. You minister to them by your presence, either physically or digitally. You minister to them in that way. Some of these people, very helpful, great blessings. Some of them, not so much. What we need most in that neutral zone is we need the Lord. This is a verse we're going to talk about tomorrow morning at the end of the sermon. And I'm sure you've heard this about waiting on the Lord. But those who wait on the Lord, what about them? They shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be faint. What do you need most when you're suffering an awful time in your life? You need the Lord. You need the Lord. And I love the spirit of David in Psalm 61. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that's higher than I. Tomorrow morning, during our sermon study time, we're going to study Psalm 31, and we're going to talk about what we ought to do when we're overwhelmed. We need to learn about this stuff before we experience it. But a lot of times what happens is we experience it, and in our ignorance and in our inexperience, we often crash and burn. We're impatient with ourselves, and we're impatient with other people because of our ignorance and our inexperience. But we're going to talk about what we ought to do when we're overwhelmed tomorrow morning in our worship time. One of the suggestions, I highly recommend this to you. Here's a goal for you when you experience loss. Don't waste your pain. Use it for the glory of God by helping others who are experiencing similar things. The heartache of bankruptcy, or maybe the loss of a business, you know, that's a harsh reality. Who can best help people who are struggling with that? Other people who have been through the same thing. They may not know how they feel, but they can relate. And that person knows they can relate if they know that they also had been through that same experience. The same thing is true with a widow or a widower. We can be really good help to other people who've lost their spouses, people who have been through divorce, people who have lost a child, people who have gone through agonizing loss. Use those things for the glory of God by trying to help other people. Let me share with you the story of Miss Carolyn in Hartville, Ohio. She was diagnosed with cancer, and she was married as a late teen to a man. They were both Christians, but he became an alcoholic, and she lived with him for decades as an alcoholic, faithful to him for many years. She got a job. The stable, consistent income in their family was her working as a custodian in a dormitory on a university campus. Can you imagine how difficult that job would be? And so I was with her and some of her family members when she got the diagnosis. It was a terrible diagnosis. After we had spent some time privately, the doctor left, and we had asked for permission to stay together for a little bit, and we talked about what we'd heard. We prayed together, and then Miss Carolyn and her husband Butch, they took care of things in the office, and then we stepped outside the building. This was January in Northeast Ohio, and it was cold, it was windy, and it was snowing. And Butch, as we stepped out of the building, said, you all stay here, and I'm going to go out and get the truck, and I'll pull it up to the door. And so while he was out there in the parking lot, Miss Carolyn said, well, maybe this will bring Butch back to the Lord. He'd gotten involved in his drinking for decades, and he had left the Lord. She hadn't, but he had. And she said, maybe this will bring Butch back to the Lord. She wanted to use her pain some way to be a blessing to others. The beauty of the story is he did come back to the Lord. Before she passed away on a Memorial Day weekend, he came back to the Lord. You know, that's what's valuable about your pain. Your painful experiences in life give you what the kids call street cred. They give you life cred. They give you credibility. When people know that you've been through a similar thing, you have an influence with them that's more valuable. And you can be empathetic, not just sympathetic, you can be empathetic. You can probably be the best helper of them because of what you've gone through. You're going to experience loss, a whole bunch of different kinds of losses between here and eternity. Use that for the glory of God by trying to help other people. We're going to take a break for about 6 minutes, so please feel free to do that. When you hear this, that'll be, y'all better get back in here.